everyone, I'm just recording a quick video to show you how I'm using my combs that I borrowed from my friend Marcia. Combs are ways that you can prepare fiber for spinning that look rather like medieval torture devices, but do nothing of the sort. Well, I mean, whatever you're into. So this is the setup for the comb. This is a Valkyrie fine-toothed comb. It comes in skinnier tines for like really fine fiber and thicker ones for really coarse fiber, but these are kind of like middle-of-the-road ones that comb pretty middle-of-the-road fiber. Makes sense. So this first one is mounted on like a comb sort of table mount. It's clamped together with these two clamps that have quick releases that are really, really useful. And this table comb is important because otherwise you'll be just sort of pulling constantly and wearing yourself out. So it's really nice to have this stuck to the table. Okay, so a little bit about combing. Combing is a way to sort of separate out your fibers and to separate it out from all the junk that kind of collects in raw fleece. And simultaneously to getting rid of all of those bits and sort of trapping them behind the comb and not being used when you're spinning. It also aligns the fibers so that they're all going in the same direction, which is a total contrast from what I usually do to spin my fibers, which is called carding, where you take either two hand cards or like a big drum carder and you kind of intentionally mix the fibers together. It's really good for blending fibers of different like sheep breeds or different colors. But as opposed to that kind of like entangling on purpose, combing gets everything aligned in a straight line so that you can spin the smoothest ever yarn that you have ever spun in your entire life. So the first thing that you want to do to get the smoothest possible like monodirectional fibers is to wash your fleece in a way that keeps these locks like in one intact sort of direction, so you can tell which end it was the cut end, which is this one, and which end is the tip end. I did a terrible job of that when I washed this fleece. It's kind of all entangled and a mess, and so I sat in front of the television and I kind of like separated out all the locks by tips and ends. So here are the tips. You can see they're like little stuck together bits, and here's the end that was cut from the sheep, and I've organized it like that so that when I put it on the comb it'll all kind of go in the same direction. So I'm going to show you how to do that. The first thing that you do is you take that cut end and you gently tug at the end with the tines of your comb, and then you pull a little bit of it off, and then you do that again and you pull a little bit off, and you're kind of like gently combing like really super fine curly hair a little bit at a time. So you're like separating it out, teasing it out, and then also getting it on the tines kind of at the same time. So we're gonna do that a few times in a row until the comb is about halfway full. So I'm just gonna quickly get this on here real fast. And all right, you can already see that everything's kind of spreading out. It's a good sign. It's showing that we are combing it already. Do. Here we go. A little bit more. And cut end. All right. Okay, so we're about a halfway full, right? You can see like this is the midpoint. You could go further and like add more, but then you run into the danger of it kind of floofing out in every which direction, and it's hard to kind of contain everything. So speaking of containing, sometimes people will spray or spritz a little bit of mist water to keep down any like static that's going on. I tend to just like over moisturize my hands, and I use that moisturizer to kind of like contain the fluff. Okay, so here's what the second comb does. It's the one that flies free. It's the one that will further open the locks tip end now. So what you want to do is you want to take this comb and go horizontally, like slasher across the middle, and gently start at the ends of the tips and start combing them open. And at the same time as you comb them, it'll start sliding onto these combs. So a little bit, see? Nice and combed. And we do it some more. And some more. And you don't want to go too far in, because then you'll try to grab too much fiber at once and you'll pull the whole contraption off of your table. Ask me how I know. So slowly but surely, horizontally you're swiping, right? You're not sort of pulling and going down or anything, because that'll wreck the process and get everything tangled up. So just horizontal, right? And swipe, swipe. And as it opens up more, you can get closer and closer to the other comb without actually jabbing it. We don't want to actually have any collisions. Sort of slide and slide. And when you have most of it, you can see there's some stubborn bits. You can kind of open them up, rearrange them, and switch hands to go the other direction. I'm lucky that I can kind of do both hands pretty evenly well. Your mileage may vary. Okay, and the last couple of swipes, there's a little bit left, and so you can make this judgment call of either like trying to use as much of this as possible and like sticking the comb in, twisting the end, and kind of like yanking it a bit, but you might end up with like little bits that you don't want. So I don't recommend doing that all that often. Okay, so speaking of bits you don't want, what remains are some short hairs that didn't actually come off of this comb the first time. And behind the comb, you have this like tangled bits that you don't really want to spin, because they'll just end up being little bumps in your yarn. And you're going for a smooth yarn. You don't want a bumpy yarn for this particular project, so you throw it away. You throw it away. You don't keep it. You just put it down. Bye. It's gone. Okay? So you're left with a rather Bart Simpson-esque hairdo on this comb. I like to smooth it out a little bit and pick off any like large globs that kind of made it through there that I don't want to spin. And I start the process of putting this fluff back on the table comb. So how to do that? Instead of going horizontally swiping, we're going to take this fluff and we're going to drop it directly down. So catching the ends, get a little bit on the table comb, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And you see how it expands out? It's a little bit of static and a little bit of just the curls kind of going wild. All right. And then you keep going down, straight down, not down and out, but straight down as much as you can. And when you've got enough of it from this comb to this comb, you can reverse switch hands and comb it a few more times. And sometimes you can kind of like open this stuff up here, get it ready, pass it once or twice more. And once again, resist the urge to use every possible bit that you could possibly use, because there are things in here you don't want to spin. See? There's like these little globs called neps. Don't spin them. Throw them away. Goodbye. Okay, so we've done our first kind of pass back and forth from one comb to another. And what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of just like smoothing it out and feeling if there are any like big bumps that I want to get rid of. And then I'm going to repeat that whole process. So I'm going to start going horizontally with this wild and free comb. And we're going to start with the ends. And comb. And comb. And comb. It's just so satisfying, right? Getting this fiber so aligned. You can see that since we've gotten the first two like large amounts of icky stuff, what's left is a lot of really fine loosened, aligned fibers. Okay. Okay, and so I've got most of it, so I'm going to switch directions. Being careful not to start putting fiber back on the old comb and kind of containing this bit. And there's just a little bit left, so I'll just loosen this up, swipe a couple more times, and forgive myself this small bit of waste. Goodbye. Okay, last pass. Okay, we've got this. We're going to go straight down. Do that a few more times. Taking it easy to like just make sure that I'm swiping straight down the whole time, because now is when we're kind of like laying all of these layers really nice and aligned, because we're about to do the best part. Okay, a little bit of tangled stuff. And now we take the fiber off, okay? And this part is deeply satisfying. You start by kind of like making a little goatee, right? Just kind of smoothing out the fibers and letting a little bit of like a point kind of form, okay? Making sure that you don't have any big bits in there that you don't want to spin, right? Feeling it out. It's kind of like the Princess and the Pea, like you can kind of feel when there's like a little lump in there. Okay, so to get the fiber off, what you do is you take what's called a diz, which is basically a flat thingy of any kind of material. Some people use buttons. I have this like wooden piece that somebody drilled some holes in, and you pull the fiber through one of these holes. I always use the smallest one because like I don't really know why I would use a bigger one, because the idea is to get things as aligned as possible and to sort of pull and draft at the same time, and I find that the smallest hole works best. So what I do is I stick a teeny tiny crochet hook through said hole, and then I take those little end fibers and I hook them through the hole, like threading a needle, and I pull and I move that diz up until we get to kind of like the butt end of that goatee here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simultaneously pull on the diz and the fluff at the same time. What this does is it essentially drafts the fibers, like pulls them all in the same direction, and then I'm going to smooth them all out and squish them together by squooshing the diz up past them. And there I have my first bit of fiber, and I'm going to pull back and squoosh, pull back and squoosh. And I'm pulling back about half the length of the fiber itself is. So see how this fiber is about 4.5 inches, maybe 5 in some places. So I'm pulling back about this much, okay? So pull back and squoosh. And I'll do this a number of times until I get about halfway, and then I have to kind of start pulling like in certain directions to kind of catch all the fibers that are still on there. So now I'm pulling down and around and kind of smoothing everything so that I can trap as much as possible without pulling too much. Because remember, the idea is to get things all aligned and to also leave behind all the cruddy stuff. And what's at the end here are the really short fibers that are hard to spin anyway, and some bad stuff that's kind of like lurking behind. So if I pull too much off, I'll start getting little bits, and I don't want the little bits, right? So you can see, maybe you can see there's like a little bit there, and I've gone too far and I've pulled too much, so I will remove some of that and throw it away. And then I have what's remaining, the most aligned and lofty fiber that I can possibly muster. and I wound it into a little nest. And you can compare how that looks, which is like really smooth, with all of the waste, which is very not smooth. We don't want to spin this. We do want to spin this. This is super lofty and super pretty. And you can see, I'll turn the camera, I've got a few nests over there and they look really yummy and they're ready to go. Okay, well, that's how I've been combing. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope the process makes a little bit of sense. This is more of a demonstration than a tutorial, so I just kind of did the thing and rambled. So yeah, have a good night.